She sat alone in the last row of the classroom. Every day, she came in quietly, placed her bag beside her chair, and kept her eyes on the floor. While the other kids laughed and played, she just stayed silent. No one knew much about her. The teacher said she had joined recently, mid-year, and hadn't said a word since. Even during roll call, she only nodded or whispered her name so softly that sometimes the teacher didn't hear it. She was different, but not in a loud way. She didn't cause trouble. She didn't run in the hallways or throw tantrums. She just disappeared in the background. No one knew what made her so quiet, but it was clear something wasn't right. One day, a man named Rayhan came to the school. He was a single father. His young son studied in the same school, and Rayhan had recently started helping out with school events and activities. He was friendly, always had a smile, and kids liked him. He didn't work full-time anymore, so he spent his extra hours giving back to the school community. That day, Rayhan was helping in the lunch area. He was arranging trays and handing out food. He laughed with the kids and asked them about their favorite subjects. Then, his eyes landed on her, the girl sitting in the corner with her lunch untouched. She didn't look up even once. Her hands were on her lap, and her food sat in front of her, still packed. Rayhan watched for a while. She wasn't looking at anyone. It wasn't shyness. It was something else. Something deeper. In home that evening, Rayhan couldn't stop thinking about her. Why didn't she talk? Why did she look like she wanted to disappear? His own son was telling him stories about friends and games, but Rayhan kept going back to that quiet girl with sad eyes. The next day, he watched her again, this time more closely. During recess, while all the children ran outside, she stayed on the bench under a tree. She watched the others but didn't move. No teacher stopped her. Maybe they were used to it now. Rayhan didn't want to intrude, but he asked his son, "Do you know that girl who always sits alone?" His son nodded. "She never talks, Baba. I think she doesn't like people." That didn't sound right too. Rayhan, he had seen that look before, the way she kept her eyes low, like she was scared something bad would happen if she looked up. He had seen it in someone years ago. He couldn't forget it. Later that week, during a school assembly, the kids gathered in the hall. Rayhan sat near the back, helping teachers organize them. Again, he noticed her. The room was noisy, full of laughter and whispers, but she didn't say a word. And when a male teacher walked past her chair, she flinched just slightly. It was fast. Maybe no one else saw it, but Rayhan did. That night, Rayhan called the school office and asked gently about her. "Do you know who takes care of her?" The receptionist checked a file. "Her parents passed away in an accident. She's living with her uncle now. Quiet girl. Doesn't talk much. That explains some things, but not enough." Rayhan didn't want to assume anything. Maybe she was just a private person. Maybe she was just grieving. But something inside him said this was more than that. He decided to wait, to watch, to listen. And so, day by day, Rayhan kept noticing little things. How she jumped at loud noises. How she kept her hands hidden under her sleeves, even when it was warm. How she looked away quickly if anyone made eye contact with her. It wasn't just silence, it was fear. Rayhan knew this would take time. He couldn't walk up to her and ask, "What's wrong?" That would only scare her more. No, he had to be careful, gentle, patient. One small step at a time. And maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to reach her, because sometimes, the people who speak the least are carrying the heaviest stories. And this little girl, who couldn't look anyone in the eye, was silently asking for someone to see her. Just see her. Asterisk. The next morning, Rayhan walked into the school like always. He smiled at the teachers, waved to a few students, and checked in with the lunch staff. But his mind was already looking for her, the quiet girl. He saw her standing by the school gate, waiting. Her bag was big on her small shoulders. She kept her head down, not talking to anyone. Other kids ran past her, laughing, shouting. She didn't move. Rayhan didn't approach her. Not yet. He knew trust didn't come fast, especially when someone had been hurt. He simply stood nearby and spoke softly to another teacher, but from the corner of his eye, he watched her. She noticed him too. He could tell. She glanced once, then quickly turned away. At lunchtime, the schoolyard was full of life. Kids were playing football, some were jumping rope, and others just sat under trees with friends. Rayhan stood near the cafeteria, helping with water bottles. That's when he noticed her again, sitting in the same corner on the far bench. Alone. Rayhan told his son to go play and walked slowly toward her. He didn't sit next to her, just close enough so she wouldn't feel threatened. Then he opened his lunchbox and started eating quietly. A few minutes passed. No words. Then he spoke softly, without looking at her. You know, when my daughter was your age, she hated carrots. Always tried to feed them to the cat. He chuckled to himself. No response, but one day, the cat ran away. Maybe it was tired of the carrots. Still no response, but she didn't leave. That was something. The next day, Rayhan brought a storybook with him. It was a simple one, about a little fox who got lost and couldn't find its way home. Rayhan sat on the same bench, not too close, and started reading it aloud softly, like he was reading to himself. He didn't ask her to listen, didn't even look at her. But when he paused and glanced to the side, he saw her eyes just for a second watching the book. Then she looked away again. Rayhan smiled gently. It's okay. You don't have to talk. Just listen if you want. From then on, every day he came with a different story. Some were funny, some a little sad, but all simple and gentle. And slowly, very slowly, she began to stay longer. One day, while he read a story about a dog who lost his favorite ball, she let out the tiniest laugh. It was barely a sound, but it was real. Rayhan didn't react too much. He just smiled and kept reading. Later that week, something unexpected happened. The school day had ended and rain began to fall. Heavy, loud rain. Most children had already gone home with their parents. But she stood alone at the gate, holding her bag tightly. Rayhan was walking to his car with his son when he saw her. She had no umbrella, no one to pick her up. She looked small and afraid of the storm. He hesitated for a moment, then walked over. Your ride hasn't come? He asked gently. She didn't speak. Just shook her head slowly. Would you like to wait in the office? It's dry there. Still no answer. He noticed her looking behind her as if worried. If you want, he said, we can call someone for you. She didn't respond, but she didn't run either. That was something. Rayhan took a deep breath. If you trust me, I can drop you home. My son is with me. You don't have to worry. She looked at the little boy beside him, who smiled shyly. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then almost a whisper, she nodded. In the car, the girl sat quietly in the back seat. She didn't look out the window. She didn't speak. But Rayhan talked softly anyway. You know, he said, my daughter would have loved this rain. She used to run outside with no umbrella, just her bare feet and a big grin. He chuckled to himself. She passed away 2 years ago, he added softly. Sometimes I still wait for her to come running back. There was silence in the car. Then, a voice, small, careful, came from the back seat. I don't like rain. Rayhan looked into the rear-view mirror. Her head was still down, but she had spoken. He smiled. That's okay. Not everyone does. She didn't say anything else, but that one line was more than enough. That day, something changed. The wall wasn't down, but a small window had opened. And sometimes, that's how healing begins, not with loud cries, but with a whisper in the rain. The rain had stopped by the time Rayhan dropped her home. She got out of the car slowly, holding her bag tight. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't smile. She just nodded once, softly, and walked toward the gate of a small, old house. Rayhan stayed. For a moment, just watching. The front door opened. A man stepped out. The girl froze, her back straight. The man didn't wave or say anything warm. He just gave her a sharp look and then moved aside to let her in. She disappeared inside quickly, without turning back. Rayhan sat in his car with a strange feeling in his chest. That wasn't the way someone should be welcomed home. He could feel it. He didn't know what her life was like inside those walls, but he could guess now. Her silence had a reason. And it was much heavier than just being shy. At school, the next day, she was already sitting on her bench when Rayhan arrived. He nodded at her like always and sat down near her with his usual book. She looked at him for half a second. That was more than she used to do. Guess what? Rayhan said, opening the book. Today's story has a dragon in it. But not the kind that breathes fire. This one paints pictures. Her eyes blinked once. He wasn't sure, but it felt like she was listening. Rayhan kept coming every day, always gentle, always patient. He never pushed her to talk. He just sat nearby and shared his quiet stories. And slowly, she started showing signs, tiny signs, that she was opening up. One afternoon, after the other kids had left the lunch area, she stayed behind. Rayhan had finished the story but hadn't closed the book yet. She stood up, walked 2 steps closer, then sat on the edge of the bench. She didn't say anything. He didn't either. They just sat in silence. But this silence felt different. It wasn't filled with fear. It felt almost calm. After a few minutes, she pointed at a drawing in the book, a small dog with big ears. Rayhan looked at her hand, then at her face. "You like him?" he asked. She nodded. "He's a little clumsy," Rayhan said with a smile. "But kind. I think he'd be a good friend." She gave the smallest smile. It was quick, gone in a second, but it was real. Over the next few days, she started sitting closer. Still quiet, still careful, but there. When Rayhan asked her simple questions like, "Do you like books?" or "What's your favorite color?" she'd answer with just one word. But those words felt like whole conversations. Then one day, she did something unexpected. She gave him a drawing. It was folded in half and slipped quietly into his hand before she walked away. Rayhan opened it after she left. It was a picture of a small girl sitting on a bench with a man reading a book beside her. The man had a kind smile. The girl had a little sun above her head. The drawing was simple, but it touched Rayhan deeply. He kept staring at it for a long time. That one paper said more than any words. But the next day, she wasn't in school. Nor the day after that. Rayhan asked the teacher, "Is she okay?" The teacher shrugged. "No one told us anything. Maybe she's sick." A week passed, still no sign of her. Rayhan grew restless. He remembered the house, that quiet street, that sharp-faced man at the door. He didn't want to interfere. But something inside him said he couldn't just sit and wait. So one afternoon, he drove to her street. House looked the same, old, tired, quiet. He parked his car a little far and waited. After about an hour, he saw her. She stepped outside to throw something in the trash. She looked thinner. Her clothes were wrinkled. And when she turned to go back, Rayhan noticed its small bruises on her arm. His heart sank. She hadn't seen him, but he had seen enough. He knew now that this wasn't just sadness or grief. This was fear. Real fear. And he couldn't ignore it anymore. That evening, Rayhan made a call. He didn't know exactly what to say, but he explained everything he had seen, everything he had felt. The school, the silence, the bruises, the fear in her eyes. The voice on the other end of the line said, "Thank you for reporting. We'll look into it." Rayhan wasn't sure what would happen next, but one thing he knew. He had to try. Because no child should be afraid to speak. And no child should be too scared to look someone in the eye. 2 days later, Rayhan was sitting in his car near the school again, waiting. He had dropped off his son and stayed, just in case. His heart was heavy. He kept wondering, was the call he made enough? Would someone really help her? He didn't know that then, just. Before the first bell rang, he saw a small van parked across the street. 2 women stepped out. One of them held a file in her hand. The other looked like a social worker. Rayhan sat up straight. A few minutes passed. Then he saw her. The girl stood by the gate, her eyes on the ground as always. But this time, she wasn't alone. One of the women gently walked up to her and knelt down to her level. She didn't touch her. She just spoke softly. The girl didn't run. She just froze. The woman spoke for a long while. Then the girl slowly nodded. Reha where he was. But he could feel the moment happening. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, but something was changing. Girl was led inside, along with the 2 women. Rayhan didn't follow. He didn't need to. He had done what he could. He stayed in the car for a while, just staring at the school building. Later that evening, the school principal called him. I just wanted to let you know, she said kindly. You were right to be concerned. The girl is safe now. She's been taken to a temporary home. We're working with the right people to make sure she gets care. Rayhan closed his eyes and breathed out. Will she be okay? He asked quietly. She's a strong little girl, the principal replied. But it'll take time. He knew that. Healing always takes time. The next few days felt empty. Rayhan came to school, helped out, talked to kids, but that bench in the corner of the yard remained unoccupied. Every time he walked past it, he remembered her sitting there silent, still scared. Then one day, a note arrived at the school office, with Rayhan's name on it. Just a folded piece of paper. He opened it. Inside was a drawing that it was the same girl and the same man on the bench, like before. But this time, the girl had her head lifted up. She was smiling. And beside her, written in shaky handwriting, were just 2 words. Thank you. Rayhan couldn't speak. His eyes burned as he folded the drawing and held it to his chest. She was safe. He didn't save the world. He didn't fight a war. He just saw a child who no one else saw, and that made all the difference. Weeks passed. Rayhan continued his volunteer work at school. The children grew to love his quiet stories and warm smile. But a part of him still missed that little girl's presence. Then one morning, the principal came to him with a smile. She's coming back to visit, she said. Rayhan's eyes widened. Really? She asked if she could see the school. And you? Rayhan waited all day with nervous energy. When the final bell rang, a small car pulled into the school's parking lot. The door opened. There she was. She stepped out slowly. She looked different. Her hair was neater, her clothes were cleaner, and there was color on her face again. But her eyes were still the same. Deep, quiet, watching everything. Only this time they weren't afraid. She walked toward him. No words at first. Rayhan knelt down so he wouldn't tower over her. And then, something simple but beautiful happened. She looked him in the eyes. No flinching. No fear, just calm. Then in a soft, clear voice she said, I drew something new. She handed him a folded paper. He opened it slowly. It was another drawing. This time, it showed the same man and the same girl standing near a window. Outside the window, the sun was shining. The girl was holding a book. And in the corner, there were flowers blooming. Rayhan looked at her and smiled. This is beautiful, she smiled back. I read books now, she whispered. Out loud. He nodded. I always knew you could. She looked around the schoolyard, took a deep breath, and said something that would stay with Rayhan forever. I'm not scared anymore. Rayhan didn't say anything. He didn't need to, because sometimes silence holds more meaning than words. The sun was warm that day. The schoolyard looked just like it always did. Children laughing, teachers chatting, a soft breeze in the trees. But for Rayhan, something felt new, different, peaceful. He stood near the bench, the one where it all began. The bench where she used to sit alone. The bench where silence told stories too deep for words. Now it was empty, but not in a sad way. It felt like a memory, like a chapter that had been closed with care. Rayhan still carried the latest drawing she gave him. He had placed it in a folder to keep it safe, just like the first two she had given. The drawing showed light, joy, freedom. It showed how far she had come. And in some small way, how far he had come too. Later that evening, Rayhan was home with his son. They were cooking dinner together. His son stirred the rice while Rayhan chopped vegetables. It was a normal day, quiet and simple. But his mind kept returning to her words. "I'm not scared anymore." He didn't know how to explain it, but those words meant more to him than anything. It reminded him why he stayed involved with the school. Why he kept coming back, day after day. Why he believed in being present, even when it felt like no one noticed. The next week, Rayhan received a call from a counselor working with her. The woman on the phone spoke kindly. "She talks about you often," she said. "You were the first person who saw her, really saw her." Rayhan didn't know what to say. She's in a safe foster home now. She started drawing again, reading, even making a friend or two. "That's wonderful," Rayhan said quietly. "She wanted me to ask if she could keep seeing you, not every day, just sometimes. Like a mentor." Rayhan felt a lump in his throat. "I'd be honored," he replied. From then on, Rayhan visited her once every week. Sometimes he brought books, sometimes they just talked. Sometimes she did most of the talking, and Rayhan listened. Each time he saw her, she looked a little brighter, a little more sure of herself. One afternoon, as they sat in the small garden at her foster home, she showed him a new sketchbook. It was full of colors, smiling faces, open skies, sunshine, and one page in particular caught his eye. It was a picture of a large hand reaching out to a small girl who was curled into a ball. The hand wasn't forcing her to stand. It was just there, open, steady, patient. And above it, she had written a single line. "He didn't save me. He waited for me to save myself." Rayhan looked at her, his eyes soft. "You're strong," he said. She nodded. "I just needed someone to believe." At first, years passed. She grew older, started writing. She won a small art competition, gave a speech at school about courage. And slowly, her story became something she shared not with shame, but with pride. She became the quiet strength in the room, and Rayhan, he remained her mentor, her friend, her quiet guide. He didn't ask for thanks. He didn't want praise. He just kept showing up. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person to notice, one heart to care, one hand to stay open, just in case. And long after the drawings faded, long after the visits became less frequent, the memory stayed alive in both of them. A little girl who couldn't look anyone in the eye, and a single father who never gave up trying. Closing reflection, final scene. Rayhan sat at the same bench again one afternoon. Years had gone by. The schoolyard was filled with new children now, new faces, new laughter. He held a worn-out folder in his hands. Inside were the drawings, each one still filled with meaning. Each one holding a piece of a journey. A gentle voice called from behind him. He turned. There she was, no longer a scared little girl. She was grown now, taller, stronger, confident. She walked up and sat beside him. "Do you still carry those?" she asked, smiling. "Always," he said. They sat in silence, both looking at the yard. After a few minutes, she whispered, "You know, that bench saved my life." He shook his head gently. "No, you saved your own life. I was just lucky enough to watch it happen." She reached over and held his hand, and for a long time they sat there, two people, connected by a quiet story that no one else saw coming. Because in a world full of noise, sometimes it's the silent hearts that hold the loudest truth.